Good morning, everybody. It is so good to be here. And I feel like I have known a lot of you forever, including some of your mothers and daddies and grandparents, and some of you I don't know at all. But I'm very glad to be here. So my name is Jim Martin, for those of you who are new to this church. And I serve this church in the role that Jordan is in for 20 years. And we brought our little children here at the beginning of those 20 years, and we raised our children here, and we love this church, and we love this community. And Waco is still home for us. When we talk about Waco, we talk about our home in Waco. It's very special to Charlotte and myself. So this is a little odd, and so I think what I'll do is I'm going to say a little bit about one of my favorite topics as of last week, and then I want to say a little bit about my work, and then I want to just move on with the Word of God and what we're here to do. Let's go to the next one, if you would. All right. So this is our brand new grandchild, born on Monday. Her name is Elsie Mae. And for some of you who know our children, this is Jamie's daughter. So we've got 4 grandchildren now, and we're really proud of this one. Whoever did that, that was a good move. So move on to the next one, if you would. I'm distracted. Thank you. So 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago, we moved from Waco to Memphis. I serve as vice president of Harding School of Theology in Memphis. Some of you have had children go to Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. We are the graduate school of theology that has been in Memphis for 60 years, and so my role is overseeing the school. And I have this kind of work where there's a lot of preaching, a lot of teaching, and then things you wouldn't believe. So leave it at that. I am so proud of I'll just mention the last 2 graduating classes, 25 this past May, and then 25 the year before. This turned out that way, 25 in each class. Of those 50, 45 are in full-time ministry. Of those 45, 22 of those are in a preaching role, just like Jordan. Now, I want to tell you, these are tough times, and that is all by the grace of God. And it's by folks like you who help. This church gave money to help us in our work. We depend on these gifts, and the church gave last year. Cannot tell you what that means. But I feel like a lot of what has prepared me for this role that I am is the training I went under, I was involving you. I learned a whole bunch from you, just being in your lives. And so anyway, that's what Charlotte and I are doing. We're in Memphis, Tennessee, and Christine is in Memphis as well with little boys, and Jamie in Oklahoma City. John 10. Let's look at John 10. I'm going to read in just a moment, but I need to tell you a silly story first. John Maxwell tells this silly story of 6 men in a boat, 3 on one end, 3 on the other. The boat had a leak. They were out on the lake. Boat had a leak. And the men on one end of the boat, where the leak was, they began scooping water frantically. The 3 men on the other end of the boat, they watched. You ever been there before where some watched and some did? Yeah. And finally, one of the men who were watching said something like this: "I am so glad that water's not coming in on our end of the boat." Isn't that silly? That's the way a lot of us look at the world. We turn on television and we see what's happening in Asia or Africa. We see what's happening in Europe. Not my problem. We see what's happening on the other side of town, see what's happening with somebody else. Glad that's not me. Which is about as silly. Because I'm telling you, we're all in the same boat. We all are in the same boat. The world is broken and sinful, and every human being is in desperate need of a Savior, Jesus. We're all in the same boat. And yet we're distracted, aren't we? There are lots of distractions. I mean, there are folks, if you listen, if you watch television, if you look at social media, people are loud and they're outraged. Oh my goodness. And people will tell you that you're in or you're out, that you're attractive or you're not attractive, that you're worth something or you're not worth very much, that you're too tall, too short, too large, too this, too that, don't have enough of this. All those distractions. One of the things we do when we come together Sunday morning is we're reminded again that we're called to listen to one voice. One voice. And for a moment, I want to just talk about this. John 10, if you turn back there, and I appreciate the reading earlier. But look at John 10 again, beginning with verse 1. And I want you to look for the word listen or hearing, depending on your translation. Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. And he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep, and all who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. No, not the sheep. I am the gate, and whoever enters through me will be saved, and they will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief only comes to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Verse 27, my sheep listened to my voice. I don't know what your week has been like. I don't know what your year has been like. I don't know what your decade has been like. But when we come together on Sunday morning, we come home from college, we come back to this place, and we remember again that his voice is the voice that I need to be listening to. Tell you something about Jesus' voice. Number one, Jesus' voice is a protecting voice. Do you know he'll never, ever, ever do you harm. He'll not do you any harm, not Jesus. Oh, he'll challenge you, but he's not here to hurt you. Not going to deceive you. Walked in one night, I was in high school. My daddy's up. Must have been 2 a.m. Worked at this burger place half the night and then came in. My daddy is seated at the kitchen table, and I'm looking, and he's got his bills lined up. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I don't know how we're going to pay these." He'd gone to work with a man he knew. In fact, it was a good friend of his. In fact, it was a friend of his that lived, as I recall, about 2 blocks from us. In fact, it was a friend who was in our congregation. My dad was always in sales, it just differed what he sold, but he was always selling something. And he went to work for his friend. And he worked for a month, he worked for 2 months, and his friend refused to pay him. And it was just a mess. And my daddy is sitting there at the kitchen table there in Southeast Dallas, and he's telling me, a 16-year-old boy, "I don't know how we're going to pay these bills." See, the thing you know about the Lord, you think what you know about Jesus, he will never do you dirty. He will never mess with you. He'll never hurt. His is a protecting voice. When you hear the voice of Jesus, when you're reading the words of Jesus, oh my goodness, you're in safe ground here. Second, his voice is a guiding voice. Guiding voice. Remember that old hymn, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah"? I don't know about you, I still need guidance. I'm still trying to figure out how to be a father. Now I'm trying to figure out how to be a father to 2 daughters who have mortgages and grandchildren and a grandfather. You say, "I know all about that." Well, that's good, but a lot of us don't. And we're just learning. And we need the guidance, you know. We were coming from Memphis to Oklahoma City. It's been a couple of years ago. Coming from Memphis to Oklahoma City, we'd never done that before. Plenty of times we'd gone Waco to Oklahoma City. That's pretty easy. Memphis to Oklahoma City, that's what we were doing. And so we got into Oklahoma City, and we never come into Oklahoma City on that end of Memphis. And I've got my phone on, got her address in the phone, Jamie's address in the phone. And this woman who lives in the phone, she was talking to us. And she would tell us to go straight. And so we are on this freeway, and all of a sudden she said, "Exit, next right." Well, I wasn't exactly sure how to get there, but I knew this is nowhere near where they live. So I didn't do what she said, and I just went on. Well, she wouldn't give up, and she said, "Exit, next right, turn around." Well, I didn't want to do that, and I told Charlotte she doesn't know, and so we just kept going, and she kept saying these, exit and go back and all that. We just finally turned her off. I don't know. I use my phone all the time to get places, and most of the time it's right. Sometimes it's not. Do you know that Jesus' voice will not steer you wrong? His voice will not steer you wrong. When you read the words of Jesus, you don't have to think, "I wonder if I should do that or not." Oh, you don't have to worry about that. His voice gives guidance and clarity. How about that? Well, sometimes we just have to learn to pay attention. See, I guess all this could sound kind of easy, and you might think, well, I hope maybe he'll end pretty quick and we can go eat lunch because this is pretty elementary. And I guess it all sounds pretty easy, except there's some things that are getting in our way, you know? For one thing, everybody get this. For one thing, many of us are wrestling with a distracted, divided heart. That's where you find yourself saying things like this: I know what's right, but. I know what I should do, but. I know what Jesus is calling me to do, but. It's a distracted, divided heart. It's a heart where basically I'm not so sure I can listen to him and depend on him because, you know, I've got my own ideas about this, and if you think I'm going to blah, 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 blah. And that distracted, divided heart will get us in trouble. Second thing that gets us in trouble with the voice of Jesus is hidden, unconfessed sin. Hidden, unconfessed sin. You know, I know, all of us, we all wrestle with sin, don't we? I mean, that's just part of being a human being. Hidden, unconfessed sin, though, is where I have decided that people like me need an out occasionally. Something I don't plan on giving up. It's my out. Hidden, unconfessed sin. It's kind of like being at home. None of you would ever do this. It's kind of like being at home and you're talking to your spouse and it's going in one ear and out the other, you know? Like I've done plenty of times. Hidden, unconfessed sin allows me to hear the voice of Jesus. It goes in one ear and out the other because I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm telling you, you want to know where the good life is? It is listening to the voice of Jesus and believing that his voice is a protecting voice, a clarifying voice, a safe voice. Luciano Pavarotti, great Italian tenor. Some of you know that name from a long time ago, perhaps. Died at 71, buried in northern Italy. Pavarotti was being interviewed on an Italian radio station one time. Pavarotti was known as one of the greatest tenors after World War II. Pavarotti said in this radio interview, he said, you know, when you turn on your radio, you'll know if you're hearing me. When you turn on your radio, you'll know if you're hearing me or not, because, listen to this one, he said, there's no voice like mine. My voice is like that of no other. I could take those words, you and I could take those words, and that is exactly right applied to Jesus Christ. His voice is not like anyone else. Not like anyone else. Move on if you would. Let's skip to the next. And the next. We're changing directions. Some of you know this hospital. I want to talk about this hospital in a minute. This is Providence, not far from us. My mother is 95. I was telling Nelta or somebody in here, I think it was Nelta earlier. My mother's 95, lives in Dallas in this assisted living facility that has various other things besides assisted living. Uh, and I don't get to see her often enough, but try to see her as much as I can. I was there a few months ago. And my mother, she can't see. She's just about blind. She's in a wheelchair. She doesn't hear very well, but she's not lost any of her candor. None of that is gone. None of her directness is gone. All that has been intact. And so I come from Memphis, and I'm in Dallas for some reason, and come to Memphis. I come to Dallas, and I'm going to see her one morning. And I get there about 8:30, and I have brought her a giant chocolate shake from Chick-fil-A and a chicken biscuit. I told my mother, once you hit in your 90s, you don't have to worry about health anymore. Eat what you want. And so I go there, she's drinking this giant chocolate shake, she's eating this chicken biscuit. And I started telling her stories. Mama, do you remember when? Do you remember when Kip and Dale and I played up and down Alhambra Street there, and we lived in southeast Dallas there in Alhambra Street? Do you remember how we would sit out under the street light, all of us in white T-shirts and shorts and little brown legs? Do you remember that we would do that, and then the mamas would stand on their porches and call us to come in? Do you remember that? I'd say, Mama, do you remember when I worked half the night at UPS while I was in college loading those trucks, and I would come in and you had that coconut pie. You had that coconut pie in the refrigerator, and I'm pretty sure there were times I ate 3/4 of that pie when I came home. Do you remember that? I'm telling one story after the other after the other. I'm telling stories about my daddy, and I'm telling stories about her. And I said, Mama, do you remember when you were a softball pitcher there in Arkansas? Wilmer, Arkansas, right outside Monticello. You remember going to Pine Bluff and pitching? Do you remember that, Mama? I said, Mama, I remember when that brown hair, pretty brown hair you had. This went on for about an hour and a half that morning, and then I had lunch with somebody, but I told her I was going to come back and see her. She said, well, when you come back, will you tell me more stories? I said, yeah, I'll tell more stories. She sips on her chocolate shake. I came back, I pushed her in the wheelchair through the halls, waving, taking her hand and helping her touch things. So I'd say, this is that ceramic thing like that elephant you had at our house, helping her remember. Went back to the room. This is in the afternoon. She said, okay, let's have another story. Why in the world would my 95-year-old mother want to hear all those stories? Why do you and I enjoy hearing all kinds of stories about growing up, stories about when the kids were little, stories about when they did this and they did that, stories about when you had brown hair or you just had hair, stories about... Why is it we like all that? It is because for a few minutes, we can take a journey back in time and relive all of that. And I can remember, and you can remember, that there was a day when things were different. There was a day, when we would go to church, and I can remember my mother with this pretty brown hair, and my dad was tall and always dressed impeccably, in that suit, and using sales, and always dressed impeccably. I remember all that. Why do you want to hear? Because you relive it again. And for a few moments, she was able to relive that again. Life's hard. In fact, life is pretty Life is really hard at times. And if I'm not careful, if you're not careful, we can just wring our hands all the time. Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? I wish it was like the old days. I wish on and on and on. You know, what would help me, what would help you is to know that the same God, the same Jesus Christ, the same Spirit who lives in me, that helped me get through life during my early days, is helping me right now. But I have to listen to that one voice. I don't want to grow old and just become an old grouch, bitter and sour. I want to continue to listen to the fresh, precious voice of Jesus until I go on to be with Him. I left that day. We stopped the stories, and I left that day. I read my mother a psalm, and I held her hand, and I said, "Mother, do you know everything is all right? If you're here, it's all right. If you pass on and die tonight, it's all right. It's all right." You know who I was talking to? Me. Because I needed to hear that. It's all right. The voice of Jesus. The voice of Jesus. Wow. Gives protection and clarity and safety. That hospital's so familiar. Brings back a lot of memories for me, driving by Providence. I remember that morning, I went up the elevator. It was pretty early in the morning. One of you were having surgery, and I don't know who it was, but it was very serious surgery, as I recall. And I just remember it was very, very early in the morning, and I went up the elevator and met with you or your family, I'm assuming. I just can't remember. And we prayed, but what I remember is going back, getting on that elevator, going down one floor, and the elevator was just full of people early in the morning. I mean, it's just full of people. We went down one floor, and a couple of nurses get on. One nurse, she is standing right at the crease, you know, where the door is closed. And she's about as close as you can get to the crease. And we're all pretty quiet on that elevator. You know how it is. You look straight ahead. You don't really, going down. And as soon as those doors close, that nurse near the crease, she did this. There was a nurse at the back. There's another nurse at the back of the elevator. She spoke to her friend who just sighed. She said, "How you doing, Mary?" Her friend didn't look back. Her friend said, "I'm richly blessed. So richly blessed." You thought it was quiet before. It really got quiet now. And the elevator kept going down. We're all real quiet. I'm just thinking about those words. The elevator doors opened. And in those, I don't know what it's like now, but in those days, you kind of fanned off to one direction, another direction to the parking lot. And where my car was parked, I ended up following Mary and a couple of her friends. And on my way to the car, I'm right behind them. There was another nurse who turned to Mary and said, "Me too, Mary. I'm richly blessed." know why Mary said that. I don't know what happened on that floor. I don't know what happened in that room that morning. I don't know if she had just dealt with a difficult family. I don't know if she had just seen someone die. Don't know if maybe she had seen something in a situation that had just broken her heart. I don't know. I just know that she got on that elevator, and that's what she said. You know how many years ago that was? It's a long time ago. And I think it's interesting that I remember that with such clarity. Because I want to tell you, it does not matter. Everybody get this. It does not matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter how tough it's been. It doesn't matter how challenging it is. There is nothing that can happen to you that can remove you from the precious blessing of God. His voice. I want to encourage us all. Well, let's listen up. And y'all don't waste a bunch of time with this hidden, unconfessed sin. That is such a life burner, and it's such a dead end. And I can tell you story after story after story out of this church of people who would tell you the same thing. Man, let's listen to the one voice. We're going to leave here in a few minutes. You'll go to lunch, hopefully a good one. You'll go to lunch. You'll go to Mama's. You'll go somewhere. You'll do what you're going to do this afternoon. You got a week coming up. You got a doctor's appointment. Some of you got a big meeting. All that. Your trip. The one thing I want to do this week is to get clear about who I need to be listening to. Does that make sense? If you want the prayers of this church here, I know these brothers and sisters would be glad to pray for you. You can come, we'll pray for you. I know you can go to these shepherds and they'll pray for you, with you. Why don't we stand and sing?
Savior, like a shepherd